Hi, everybody. I'm Maria Trabka, and I have the pleasure to speak with you all tonight and share with you at least an introduction to farmland conservation. It can be a fairly complex subject and take a lot of time and many such conversations back and forth until landowners are ready, know enough about it that they're ready to act or decide not to. We live in a beautiful, beautiful area, rich, fertile soils. Here you're looking at an aerial view of the town of Saratoga. There's Stafford Bridge going over Fish Creek. And you can see two of the Hanahan family farms right in the center of the slide, the McMahon horse farm over to the right, and quite a few other farms in the area, including the Century Horse Farm as well. So you can see how much farmland we have in that area just beyond Saratoga Lake. Saratoga Plan stands for Preserving Land and Nature, and it's a private, independent, not-for-profit organization serving the people and the communities of Saratoga County so that you can accomplish your conservation goals for preserving rural character, wildlife habitats, and scenic beauty, ensuring that this region remains a wonderful place to live, visit, work, and farm for generations to come. The three primary areas that we work in are farmland, woods and waters, and building trail systems throughout the county for people to visit. This workshop, as Tori mentioned, is sponsored by the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, and also a program called the Farmland for a New Generation, which helps not only young farmers, but beginning farmers to access land, a critical resource that they need and often very hard to come by. We're blessed with the American Farmland Trust in our area that helps us build policy and funding for farmland conservation, Cornell Cooperative Extension that offers a lot of technical resources for farmers, and so they have a good business and they have a good growing information. And Saratoga County, which also has a funding program for farmland conservation. Saratoga County is the second fastest growing county in New York State. It has added 4.8% in its population since 2010. But the more disturbing fact than just the numbers of people is that new development is taking 5 times as much land per person as it used to in the past. So that's directly in competition with farmers for land. 7% of Saratoga County's farmland has been permanently protected. So the farmland in the county is the yellow areas, and the red areas are the farms that have been protected to date. So you can see that we still have a long way to go. A lot of good farmland out there that has not yet been protected. The rest of the farmland is subject to development pressure. And as I mentioned, the competition is fierce with developers because farmland makes good and is some of the more easier land to develop because it typically has fairly good drainage and you can put in septic systems. So in order to keep our agricultural industry going, we need to pick up the pace of farmland conservation in the county. Why should we conserve farmland? Well, because our lives depend on it. It produces the food we eat. It filters water, replenishes groundwater, gives us safe food, local food. We're not depending on, as you know, like right now with the way the markets and the transportation is moving around, there's a lot of things in our grocery stores that empty shelves, and we need that good, local, secure, safe food source to know that we'll always have enough to be able to feed ourselves. Currently, New York State farmers can only feed 30% of New York State's population. So living upstate, it seems like, oh, we could easily feed our people. That's true. But we are the breadbasket in New York City. And so we really, for the entire state, we're only producing enough to feed 30% of the people here. And so every farm is important, and we are losing a farm every 3 days on average. More and more people are interested in local food and understand the importance of having it come from local farmers for a number of different reasons. It's very important to our economy. It is a $125 million economy industry in Saratoga County, and it produces over 1,500 jobs, as well as agricultural support service, veterinarians, tractor supply companies, all the service industries that the agricultural community relies upon. Oh, sorry, it stopped moving forward when I tried to make it. So when you do conserve farmland, it's protected and it's forever available for farming. It stays in private hands, it's managed by the owners, the farmers themselves, and it stays on the tax rolls. And studies show that farmland, though, it pays more in taxes than it uses in services. Therefore, it's a very important part of the local town fiscal structure, because it lowers property taxes for everyone. As they often say, cows don't go to school. They pay school taxes, but they don't go to school. So it helps everybody's, it benefits everyone tax-wise. Most farms are not just farm fields. They usually have some wetlands, they usually have some forest land, a lot of natural habitats. And these places are important because they purify our air, they cleanse our surface waters, they capture stormwater and reduce stormwater runoff and all the damage downstream that causes. They recharge our groundwater reserves. Most of Saratoga County is dependent upon groundwater in one way or another, either through wells or because of seeps into reservoirs or lakes. But that's coming from our groundwater, and that is seeping in when soils are not paved over, regardless of whether they're farming or forest land. They are recharging our groundwater. They're providing wildlife habitat. A lot of that wildlife habitat hosts natural pest controls, birds, hawks that eat, mice and insects and other things like that, keep down our pests, and also provide habitat for our pollinators. They moderate climate, both winter and summer, and they capture carbon and reduce greenhouse gases and help address the whole climate change issue. And if society had to replace what land does for us, it would be very, very costly, and the results would not be as good as what land does for us. And of course, conserving farmland is important because it continues a traditional way of life. A family, generation after generation after generation, has worked land and kept the ground open and productive and fertile, and that it keeps that practice, that habit going, as well as just the scenic beauty that it provides for all of us of having open space. So all those things I described, whether it's economic or environmental or social, those are public benefits. And because there are public benefits, that's why we can conserve farmland. That's why there is public funds available. Without those public benefits that benefit everybody, not just the farmer, that we wouldn't be able to have these programs. But conserving land is a voluntary action. Nobody says you have to do it. It is certainly your right to conserve your land, just like it's your right to develop your land. It's no different than that. So why do landowners decide to do that? Lots of different reasons. One is that it can really improve your bottom line. If you have a lot of debt, you can extract some equity from the land by selling your development rights and making your operation more profitable. Some farmers who sell their development rights reinvest in their farm operations, modernize their equipment, build infrastructure improvements, or in many cases, they acquire additional land, often land that they rent and they rely on, and they need that extra acreage. Many farmers only own about 1/3 of the acres that they work, and those acres are very vulnerable because the landowners are not farmers themselves, and if their land changes hands, the next owner, might not want farmland there. They may decide to convert it for development, or just even, not have the farmer on there anymore. So a lot of people who need more land security, a lot of farmers, they'll use proceeds to buy more land. Some farmers, a lot of farmers, you hear them say, my land is my retirement. I want to sell my land when I'm no longer able to work it. But you can just sell the development rights and keep your land if you want to, and then you'll have some funds for your retirement years. It's one way to handle that situation. And many people I've heard over the years say that they really want to honor their ancestors, the people who came before them, who worked the land, who worked so hard to keep it clear and productive and fertile, who in many cases they cleared it themselves, and also things were not, we didn't have the equipment back then that we have now, and things were a lot harder physically to do. So a lot of people want to honor their ancestors and also set up their descendants, future generations, that can continue to farm just like the people who came before them did. Other people may have a family situation where they want to leave the farm to one of their children, but who wants to continue to farm it, but they have other children. So this is a way for them to extract some cash out of the farm and to perhaps pass the land on to one child, but give the other children some inheritance through cash. But no matter what reason people choose to do it, it is truly a gift to the community. As I mentioned before, there are public benefits, many public benefits to doing this. And some people are really driven by understanding that their land, it doesn't stop at their border. Like, it affects so much more beyond their boundaries, that they choose to conserve it for future generations. Some people have very much a stewardship ethic themselves. They feel like they are just here for a short time to take care of this land, but that it's, I don't know, like not as, they're not as ownership driven about it. They feel like they're just a temporal caretaker for the land, and they want to make sure that that continues in the future. When you put when you conserve your land, you've taken off its development rights, and so its value is usually reduced. And that can really help a young beginning farmer to be able to afford the land, because it has a lower value now, and that can be a big benefit. Over 30% of New York farmers are over the age of 65, and 90% of those do not have a younger farmer working with them to manage their farms. So we're expecting a significant change in ownership of farmland in the coming decades. And if we can, we would prefer that good farmland goes to farmers and not to others. So the way that you conserve farmland is by placing a conservation easement on it. And a conservation easement is a legal agreement between a landowner and a nonprofit land trust, like Saratoga Plan, or a government entity, like a town. Those are the only two types of organizations that can hold conservation easements. And the easement is this legal agreement, and within it, it specifies the restrictions on the land for both development and for use on the land. And it stays with the land, no matter who owns the land in the future. It's a permanent legal agreement that one landowner decides to do, but all subsequent landowners have to follow. An agricultural conservation easement has the specific purpose to make sure that it protects the ability of, nothing can be done on the land that would prevent people from being able to farm it or to use it for forestry in the future. Doesn't mean you have to farm it. It just means that you can't do anything that would prevent someone after you from farming it. You couldn't pave it. Landowners, they continue to manage their land as they see fit. And we try and write easements so that they allow farms flexibility to be able to respond to market cycles, to new products that people are interested in, and new technologies. I mean, 10 years ago, who knew we'd be growing hemp? Like that was not a crop that people were well, maybe in their back fields, in the corn somewhere, but there's just new crops, or mushrooms are popular now. People are growing mushrooms in their woodlands and as a crop. So we try and build that into conservation easements. Or sometimes, a land might have been an orchard at one time, and now someone wants to do beef. Or, it could be a dairy farm, and now they want to do vegetables. So you want to allow for that flexibility over time. As I said, the land remains in private hands, but it can be transferred to your heirs. It can be sold, it can be used as collateral for loans, but its value will be slightly reduced once you sell development rights. In an agricultural easement, structures are allowed, and the location would be determined by the conservation easement. So structures for agriculture and forestry can be built, typically anywhere on the property. So you can put a new barn up, a run-in shed, a maple syrup house, anything like that can go up We try and make sure that it doesn't go up on the best land, the prime soils, if at all possible. But if locating it on prime soils is necessary and it might impede operations a little bit, then it has to be allowed. Residential structures, though, and improvements, as well as any small-scale rural enterprise like a farm stand, would be confined to some area on the property, and that would be written into the easement. Although it can be, if you don't know where it might go, you can also have a flexible, it can be on a 2-acre area to be defined in the future, or on a 2-acre area in one of these 3 places or something like that. So there's some flexibility there. One thing that will be limited is the amount of impervious surfacing on the property. So the amount of roofing and the amount of surface paving will be limited to make sure that the soils are open and available for farming. As I mentioned, there might be areas defined for farm stands or for processing crops. Any kind of more commercial type of activity will be defined in the easement. So it takes a lot of thought to on your site planning before you decide to go ahead with the conservation easement. And you do want to consider, sometimes people can be very limited by, they only want to write into the easement things that they want to do, and we have to convince them, but that someone in the future might want to do something else, or so let's build that into it, because this goes beyond your tenure as the farmer here. And that's something that we can help you with, site planning, to make sure that the future is built into it. In the woodlands, in a agricultural conservation easement, you can log for your own firewood or for your own construction, your own timber for construction. But if you want to have a commercial timber harvest, you do have to hire a qualified forester to supervise the sale of the commercial timber. And you're usually better off if you do have a qualified forester help you with that as well. You still retain all the fun and educational aspects of your farm. You can still hunt and hike and snowmobile, and you can have educational programs. There can be public access, but there doesn't have to be. That is controlled by the landowner. So we have some farms that we've done that the landowner wanted to have a specified snowmobile trail or a specified hiking trail that crossed their property, but that is completely up to the landowner. Sometimes people think that when public funding is being used that there's going to be public access, but that's not the case. That is the landowner's prerogative. There will be no mining on any conservation easement. You cannot remove the minerals, the rock, the gravel, the sand, that cannot be removed from the property. You can move a small amount of it around on the property. Like if you have your own gravel bank and you want to, build up a farm road or something like that, you would work with the easement holder to determine how much. It's usually specified how much you can move per year or something like that. You can't subdivide the property unless it's for agricultural purposes. So that would come into play, like if you wanted to subdivide off a field for a neighboring farmer to use for farmland, then you could do that kind of a subdivision. So that's the only kind of subdivision that's allowed. You can't subdivide off the house and sell it or something like that. It has to stay with the property. And if there's a mortgage on the property, the mortgage holder has to agree to subordinate the mortgage to the easement. So they'd have to agree that the easement is permanent no matter what. And say if you defaulted on your mortgage and they wanted to foreclose, they would be foreclosing on a property with a conservation easement on it that would stay on the property. They can't undo it. There's also one other provision that can be in a conservation easement, and that is if you want to make sure that the owner of the property is always a farmer or an heir, someone in your family. That is called a preemptive purchase right, and it helps to keep farmland in farmers' hands. But it is more restrictive because you can't sell your property, out on the open market necessarily, and so it does have a little more value, and so you get, if you're selling your development rights, you might get a little bit more money by putting this clause in there. And in New York, all of the land trusts throughout the state have bounded together and started the New York Farmland Finder. And on there, people who own farmland looking for farmers to buy it or lease it can list their land. Farmers who are looking for land can list themselves, and we can help you find a match for your property. So the choice is yours, but once you make a decision and complete an easement, there's no turning back. The development rights are extinguished and they cannot be bought back. So once an easement has been put on a property, the easement holder, which would be Saratoga Plan or another land trust or a town, will be responsible for making sure that that easement is followed forever. So we will visit the property at least once a year. We will keep records of what's on the property, what's been done, what's been changed, where there's been logging, where there's been a barn built, where there's been a barn taken down, where a farm stand has gone up, all of that. We'll keep track of all that over the years. And we'll also stay in touch with the landowner quite closely just to make sure that if they're thinking about making a change, they're thinking about the easement, and we're looking it up and making sure that what they want to do aligns with the terms of the easement. If someone, and usually if someone violates an easement, it's not done on purpose, it's just done like they didn't think, they didn't think about, oh, I have an easement, I need to look up the rules, or, whatever, and they do something. If that happens, they have to correct it. So there are times, say people built a house, they have to take that house down. So you don't want to make a mistake. That's why you want to keep that line of communication open and thought about, what are the terms of the easement. The easement holder has to legally enforce that easement. So we have to make sure we have to take landowners to court if we never have had to, but if they should violate and be unwilling to correct it.
Right,
and if the
sorry.
Go ahead.
We had a question, and it was asked, does no mining also include no fracking?
I don't know the answer to that. I think so, but we would have to, it depends. So if we were to, I don't know, I'll have to look that up. There are federal rules around conservation easements, and mining was one of those original, back in the 80s when easements started, one of those original things. But I would have to have an attorney talk about that. And I know fracking, it's not a big deal in our area, so we haven't had to face it. Some people have sold their or leased their mineral rights, and we have worked with landowners to undo those leases before they put easements on their properties. And if you're ever, the last point here is if you're ever thinking to sell your property or transfer your property, you should notify the easement holder that it is going to be a new owner. And we often will meet with potential buyers of properties and make sure that they fully understand what it is they're getting into and what they can and can't do. Because sometimes people have ideas of what they want to do, and it's just not the right property for them because of the easement. So there's many steps to putting an easement, and it takes a long time. But it warrants that long time because it's permanent once it's done. So we want to make sure that we do it right. And easements can be donated or they can be sold. And if they're sold, it's called the purchase of development rights. And typically, even if it's sold, there is some sort of partial donation by the landowner where they are receiving less compensation than the full value of their conservation easement. And but the part that they donate can be considered a charitable donation and can be written off on income taxes. The value of the conservation easement, how does that number is determined by a qualified appraiser. It has to be an appraiser who has been trained in how to do conservation easements. And there's funding available through the federal program, the USDA, New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, Saratoga County, some towns, and typically funding is awarded on a competitive basis. So what makes a competitive funding application? First of all, the soils. If your soils are really, really good, you're going to score high. The public investments in farmland want to prioritize the highest yielding soils. That you have a strong agricultural operation or a strong business, even if you're not a strong operation yet, but a good business plan and seemingly the wherewithal to accomplish it. That's an important criteria. The size of the property, bigger is better usually, unless you are doing some sort of high intensity, high yielding, value added type of crop. How cost effective is your proposal? How our development rights around here are probably medium compared to the whole state. Some places in this state out west are the value is less, and other places downstate the value is very high. So we're kind of probably right in the middle there. How much development pressure is there? So Saratoga County, being the second fastest developing county in the state, is will always rank high in the development pressure, particularly if you're along the Northway corridor. Context. So good farmers make good farm neighbors, right? What kind of context are you in? Do you have a lot of farms around you? Are there enough farms in the area to support the agricultural service industry? Are there a lot of neighbors who butt up to your farm who are going to have nuisance complaints for odors or dust or something like that? So the context that your farm sits within is very important as well. How committed are you? I mean, is this something that you really want to do? Because it is a long haul to get there, and you've got to really want it. And what's the likelihood that this land is going to go into those matchy things? So there are a number of tax things that you can ask your advisor if they apply to you. For the part that you donate, you can write off up to 50% of your adjusted gross income in the year you make the donation. And if you don't use up the entire donation in 1 year, you can carry it out as an income tax deduction for up to an additional 15 years or until it's used up. That's for all landowners. If you're a farmer who earns more than 50% of their income, you can write off 100% of your income with your charitable donation until you've used it up or until 15 years is up. Property taxes. Now you can ask your assessor to lower your assessment on your property taxes. If you're already getting an agricultural assessment, it's highly unlikely that they're going to reduce it any more than that. So this is something that most farmers are already getting, and so it usually doesn't apply for farmland. It's more for forest land. But if you have made some sort of donation in the project, you can get 25% of your property taxes on your land back each year from New York State through an income tax credit. So that applies to school taxes, county taxes, and town taxes. 25% of what you pay on the land, not your house, not your barns, just your land. Now, this is a lot to take in. So I'm not expecting, people to catch it all, but in the end, I'll tell you references that you can go back and look at this in more detail. So those were the taxes you might save, right? Income tax, property tax credit, property taxes. But you also if you're selling your development rights, you're receiving something. So you may have a capital gains tax that you might have to pay. And you can subtract at any basis on the property before you calculate the capital gains liability. And also, if you buy more land with it, you can defer the capital gain tax until that land is sold. There is a transfer tax on anything you receive. So you pay $4 for every $1,000 that you receive, or 0.4%. Estate taxes are less of an issue than they used to be because the threshold for paying estate taxes has gone up. I mentioned that there's usually costs about $50,000 for a conservation easement. It can be higher depending on the complexity and if there's more than one easement involved or something like that. But what those costs do are they pay legal fees, a survey is done, an appraisal is done, title insurance, environmental inspection, preparing a baseline document that documents your property, project management by Saratoga Plan or the town, and a stewardship fund so that we can always take care of that property or steward that easement forever. So, but none of those costs come out of the landowner's pocket during the project. At the end, the landowner has to pay their own attorney, the transfer tax, the capital gains tax. And if they're going to claim a charitable deduction, they have to get an independent appraisal. Next steps. So I mentioned there are some materials and resources that are available. You received some of those. Let's see, where are they? You received these 3 publications. Consider Questions and Answers for Landowners. That's a really good one. It helps you kind of go through what the common questions are that we get, and helps you even generate more questions on your own than you might, things you might not have thought to ask us. This one explains conservation easements on agricultural lands. And this one is, once you've decided to go forward, this is a step-by-step. These are all the steps that are involved, and you can kind of follow along, because it does take a long time to do. So sometimes people don't know where we're at in the process, you know, or they just forget, you know, it takes so long that you don't remember, oh, you know, oh yeah, that's right, we got the title report back, you know, a year ago or whatever. So that one helps you follow along. So the next thing, if you wanted to learn more, besides, you know, reading more, all those things are on our website as well. You would set up an appointment to meet with us and to look at your land, to talk about what it is that you want to do with it. We would do some mapping and some analysis of your property and talk it over with you. We'd, you know, all your questions that you have. Many times, you know, this can take, some families, this can take years. I mean, people can, and we don't, I mean, that's what our job, that's what we do. We don't care how many times we have to sit down at your kitchen table and answer the same questions over and over until everybody is satisfied. Or you decide not to even go forward, that's fine. That's like I said, that's what our job, that's what we do, is to help you through the process. We can do some sort of estimated budgets. We won't have the appraisal to base it on, but you know, we can help just based on other projects that we've done in the area. We can come up with some preliminary numbers, or sometimes a range. Like sometimes we'll do a budget based on a low or a high. We don't like to, you know, exceed people, you know, we don't want people to be expecting more than we think it will really appraise at. So we have to be fairly conservative in doing these. But even when we apply for funding on your behalf, we'll boost the number up just in case it comes in higher. We don't want to be caught short either. And we have to get an endorsement by the town to see if they'll, and some of the, like I said, some of the towns will put up some funding as well if they really want to conserve their farmland. And most of our towns have farmland protection plans in place. And some of them actually have enough funding that they can help. But the town of Malta is putting up some funding. I think the town of Ballston would put up some funding. Clifton Park puts up farmland funding. So there's a number of towns that have the resources to help with these projects and really want to conserve what's left. So we prepare all the application materials, we consult with you, you get to see them all. Some of them you'll help us write as far as describing your operation. We guide you through all the steps. We have to go to the county's Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board and get an endorsement for all applications. We have to, if there are county funds involved, it has to go through 3 of their committees and then to the full Board of Supervisors. Town boards must pass the resolution, and Saratoga Plans Board also has to approve the project. And our goal is to make sure that all of your questions are answered as many times as needed before you make a commitment to proceed ahead. We do not want any surprises later. We want to make sure that people are fully informed when they're going into the project, that they know what they're getting into and they're ready to do it. And we'll work diligently on your behalf. Until we apply for a public funding or until we have to get an endorsement by a public body, the fact that you're even speaking with us is completely confidential. We do not share any of your information with anyone without your permission, and you know, we'll uphold your privacy throughout the process. I mentioned these publications. Here's our contact information. This is me. There's Tori. Tori@saratogaplan.org. Here's our office over here. Here's our website, saratogaplan.org. And yeah, so that's an introduction for you. And I think I'll take questions now. And like I said, I know it was a lot to throw at you in an hour. I apologize, but it's good to get started. At least you've heard it once, you know, you've got to hear it a few more times.